Here we go, episode 141 of The Hardline. Michael Merlo and Joe Masiri filling in for his brother JM, a special edition of The Hardline, as we're going to take you through everything that happened in week one of football. Joe, happy to have you. This is technically
happy to be here.
Happy to have you back. You were on an episode.
That's right.
What was that? Almost a year? Over a year
ago. Absolutely. But now here, filling in for my brother, and very happy to be here. Excited to talk some American football on this show today.
One thing that JM and I both forgot to do when we did our little redesign with the logo is thank Joe for the logo. Joe made the logo, and it's gotten rave reviews, and it's amazing. So, Joe, we forgot to thank you on the podcast, and I realized it that night. Thank you for the logo.
Hey, don't mention it. Happy to do it. Happy to be of service. I'm glad you guys like it. Very excited about the new direction of the show, and let's get this going, shall we?
Definitely getting this going. A lot happened. I'm going to rant about the Giants in a little bit, like a quick 3-minute rant.
Oh, yeah. Looking
Joe,
forward to that.
Packer fan, loses his quarterback for a few weeks. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But the first thing we are going to talk about today, the good, the bad, and the ugly from what happened in week one. There was a lot of ugly, but there was some good. There was some good. And we're going to go to Buffalo for some good, okay?
I like it.
Because Josh Allen, my guy, MVP, Super Bowl MVP.
My guy, too.
Your guy.
You know I love Josh Allen.
Josh Allen had a big day against the Cardinals in what was a high-scoring affair.
Absolutely, yeah. So, as Merlo kind of mentioned, Josh Allen, also kind of my guy, picked him to win MVP this year. He showed out. Very few quarterbacks showed out this past weekend. He was one of them. I think it'll be the start of an MVP campaign. And, yeah, he looked really good. Definitely a lot better than a lot of other quarterbacks that played on Sunday.
Kyler played okay, too. Kyler's tough to play against because we know about his speed. We know about his elusiveness. Doesn't get Marvin Harrison Jr. involved at all yesterday, and he missed him. Did you see that video of him wide open?
Wide open on the last play, and he had his hand sticking up, begging for that. Would have been the game-winning touchdown.
They were down 6.
They were down by 6. Yeah,
the Cardinals
would have likely been the game winner.
The Cardinals kept that game close. It was interesting because they get off to the big lead. Then they go down 11, get the kick return, and you're like, this is a game again. They stop the Bills, and they had a chance, can't execute. That defense is going to be bad. We're going to talk about the Cardinals a little bit later, but that defense is really bad. But offensively, they're going to score a lot of points. And then when they get Marvin Harrison Jr. involved, they can be a little sneaky.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of what I thought about the Cardinals going into the year. I thought that they could kind of be a sneaky, like a team you don't want to play, a sneaky good offensive team. The defense doesn't have really a lot of strengths there, but Gannon could maybe help them play a little bit over their talent level. I think that he's a pretty good NFL coach. They were pretty competitive last year, and everybody thought that they were going to be the number one overall pick. Yeah, I thought Kyler looked pretty good. James Conner had a big day, too. The running game looked really good. The Bills basically said, hey, we're going to play a lot of cover two, and they said, all right, we'll run the ball. Kyler was running the ball. He was scrambling out of the pocket, making some big plays, and I thought the Cardinals looked pretty good. But at the end of the day, the Bills have Josh Allen. Doesn't matter what weapons he has, he managed to get it done.
Something that just clicked in my head was that if you had success yesterday and either scored points or won the football game, you did one thing right. You ran the ball. Cardinals ran the ball pretty well. The Buffalo Bills ran the ball pretty well. Both scored points. Bills win the game. Look at the Vikings against the Giants. Look at the Lions against the Rams. Look at the Texans against the Colts. All ran the football, and they were good. That's what you have to do, it looks like, early, because the quarterback play yesterday was terrible.
Yeah, it seems to be a common trend. I mean, I'm not sure if it's just because you have a lot less starters seem to play now in the preseason than they used to. So it seemed like there was a lot less synergy on offense going, especially in the passing offenses. A lot of offensive lines weren't in sync. The quarterbacks weren't in sync with their receivers, and it ended up being a problem. Scoring was way down this past Sunday. But like you said, a lot of teams that ran the ball effectively ended up winning their games. I mean, you look at like the Bengals. That passing game was all over the place. Obviously, no T. Higgins. Jamar Chase was limited in that game.
Right.
And Joe Burrow ended up having a tough day at the office in a game where they were heavily favored. And they were trying to establish a running game. Obviously, no more Joe Mixon there. That wasn't very effective either. And they end up getting upset. So the Cardinals and the Bills were really the highest scoring game of yesterday, and really that was because both teams were running the ball effectively, and then you also had two quarterbacks that did what they had to do and played very well.
Yeah, Josh Allen ran for 2 touchdowns as well. He looked effective even without the weapons. Yes, a bad defense. We're going to stress that probably all season long when discussing the Arizona Cardinals. A bad defense, but they were still able to get the ball to their weapons that are going to have to step up this season for Josh Allen. Keon Coleman had a pretty nice day, and I think they missed him wide open for a long touchdown, or he was open and Allen just didn't see him. Khalil Shakir is going to be involved. He was involved down the stretch last year. He's going to have a big year. They weren't even able to get the ball to Dalton Kincaid yesterday. He's going to have a big year too. So, everybody's worried about the Bills and losing these weapons, but I think yesterday was a perfect example of they're going to run the ball, they're going to trust James Cook, they're going to trust Josh, and they're going to get these guys that they have the ball. Matt Collins is making plays for them.
Yeah,
he's
absolutely.
A weirdo.
Yeah.
You see how weird he is?
Yeah, absolutely. He's a weird guy.
He
came up big yesterday. He made some plays for them yesterday when they needed it.
He walks around barefoot.
Yep.
He put M&Ms, I think, yesterday in his water or Gatorade or something after the game.
I didn't see that.
And then he posted it. I got to try and find it. He's a weird cat, but he made plays for them. And the room is deep, the wide receiver room. It's not the names, but they're deep. And that's what I'm saying. When you have a superstar quarterback, which they have, he's going to get these guys the football. And if they're competent, it's going to work.
Yeah, and I honestly think that in a way they kind of remind me, I don't mean to talk about the Packers already, obviously I'm a Packers fan, but they remind me of them a little bit in the sense that you don't have a clear number one there anymore. You have a deep room of receivers, right? They have Curtis Samuel, they have Dalton Kincaid, they have all these guys there that nobody really jumps off the page as like a Stephon Diggs would, who they had last year. But honestly, this is the type of offense that the Bills want to run. That's why I wasn't really all that concerned about the loss of Diggs or Gabe Davis really going into this year because, first of all, they have Josh Allen. And you saw, again, against a bad defense, but still, you saw how great he was this past Sunday against the Cardinals. And then you also have an offense now, ever since Joe Brady took over as their offensive coordinator in the second half last year, that is going to run their offense essentially through their running game, whether that be Josh Allen and then also James Cook with his touches being way up since the second half of last year. And now you have sort of Josh Allen playing point guard in a way where he's going to pass it to the open guy. He's not trying to force it to a guy like Stephon Diggs. He's going to get it to the open man, and he did that very effectively this past Sunday, and that's why I still have the Bills winning this division. They got off to a pretty good start doing so. I'm a little bit worried about their defense, I will say.
Yeah.
A little bit worried about their defense, but I think that the offense will be fine. And I expect big things out of both Josh Allen and the Bills this season.
And it was putting mini M&Ms into his water bottle after the game and then drinking it. I mean, he's a freak, but he can play a little bit.
Yeah.
He stepped up for the Raiders last year. Was he with the Raiders last year?
I know he was a Falcon, right? He might have been a
Raider. 2 years
last
ago
year.
that he stepped up with the Raiders then.
Yes. Yeah, he could be a nice little piece for them. He made a couple plays. His name popped up on Red Zone a few times yesterday. So
look at Matt
they
Collins
have a deep
getting
group
some
there.
love.
I like it.
He's getting some love here on episode 141 of the Hard Line.
Shout out Matt Collins.
Let's switch over some of the good from yesterday. The Texans.
Yes.
I thought that was an impressive win because you look at Anthony Richardson and he's making his first start of the year, obviously coming off the injury. And there's a lot of worries about whether he could stay healthy. What is he like? We don't know what he is as a quarterback yet in this league. And really in general because of just the lack of playing time he's had because of injuries and different things in college and high school. Even going back to high school, hasn't played that many games. So there's a lot of questions with him. And he made a couple of really big plays yesterday that could have really swung the momentum to the Colts. And the Colts can go on a run. And you want to credit the Texan offense for staying centered and not letting them go on runs, or just blame the Colts defense for not doing a good job. The Texans didn't allow that momentum to switch over to Indianapolis, and they're able to win a tough division game on the road.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, kind of building off of the point that you brought up before, Mike, talking about how teams that were able to score effectively this past Sunday did so by running the football. The Colts defense against the run was putrid. Joe Mixon had a huge day. They ran the ball with him 30 times for 159 yards and a touchdown. If you're giving up over 5 yards a clip at that sort of volume, you're usually going to have a rough day at the office, and that's unfortunately what happened for the Colts. But overall, I thought that Anthony Richardson was a mixed bag yesterday. I mean, he made that one throw off his back foot with pressure in his face on a dime. That ball had to be 60, 65 yards in the air. Incredible throw, and that's the type of arm talent that he has. But like you said, he's an enigma, this guy. He comes out of college, he's almost like a Josh Allen type,
Yeah.
where he's got that raw athleticism, the build, and then the arm strength that is, 99th percentile arm strength in the NFL. And, there's some accuracy issues there. We certainly saw it yesterday. He missed Adonai Mitchell a couple of times yesterday for what could have been some pretty big plays. He only had 19 passing attempts yesterday, only 9 completions. And the interception, I thought maybe wasn't his fault. It looked like the tight end got a little bit tripped up on that one pick that he threw in the red zone. Mm-hmm. But still, it was an uneven day for Anthony Richardson. But all I think about when I watch him is, man, if he could really clean up some of those mechanical issues, some of that accuracy issues that he has, man, he could be a special, special player. Like I said, I don't mean to talk about Josh Allen so much, but like a Josh Allen type, he has that sort of arm and that athleticism.
He does. His pocket awareness worries me a little bit. And listen, it's week 1. I think he's played that was his 7th game in the NFL. I think he ran into a couple of sacks yesterday. He didn't know when to get in and out of the pocket. He's huge. That's has to be the first thing you look at. The guy is ginormous, and he can run, and the arm. I didn't realize this watching it live, and even on the replay yesterday until I saw the replay today. He slipped on that back foot.
Yeah.
And then set himself and then threw that bomb.
It was an unbelievable throw. It was it was the best throw of the weekend, I thought, for sure. Trevor Lawrence also had a good one, I thought, to Brian Thomas Jr. for a touchdown. But
yes.
Anthony Richardson, that was an unbelievable throw, but the consistency has to be there for him to. But I have to say, we're going to lay into him a little bit for that inconsistency, but he outperformed a lot of other young, talented quarterbacks this past weekend, so I don't want to lay on to him too much. And I'm a big Anthony Richardson fan. I hope that he stays healthy and he finds that consistency. I think this Colts team could be good, and I hope that he, he finds that groove, because this could be an explosive offense. They have a great running back, obviously, in Jonathan Taylor, who had a little bit of a rough day at the office yesterday, only 3 yards per carry. And like you said, going back to not being able to run the football effectively when your passing game isn't all there is kind of going to kill you. But hey, at the end of the day, they only lost by 2 points to a very good Texan team. I thought that C.J. Stroud played a pretty solid game. He got away with a couple of mistakes, but for the most part, he did play pretty well. That connection with Nico Collins was really something to watch. They had that third down. That was an unbelievable throw and catch for that third down conversion at the end of the game that pretty much sealed it. That was really special to watch. Stephon Diggs, obviously, with the 2 touchdowns. That's a big acquisition. He's going to be big for them. But it seems like Nico Collins has established himself now as this elite receiver with a potentially elite quarterback. I also expect big things from C.J. Stroud this year.
Yeah, Stroud, who's gotten some heat from your brother, my co-host.
Yeah.
He's not a fan of the Texans this year. I thought he was very impressive. And I do agree with JM in some senses, and the people that aren't as high on the Texans, like, hey, you're going to be hunted this year. It's a different feeling, like the Lions are. Like, the games that the opposing teams are circling you on the schedule now, as opposed to you circling them. You're going to be favored in a lot of games. This is a different feeling for a team that was the underdog last year. And I thought he was impressive in that game, being a road favorite against a good team in your division. That's an impressive win, and I thought he was good. He got away with that pick that ended up he was out of the.
He did.
The top,
He did.
The foot was out of bounds.
Yeah, there was one there, and then there was another one that was dropped. He definitely got away with a couple of mistakes, but again, he still had one of the better performances of the weekend out of all the quarterbacks, and obviously he's a very talented young player. I'm sort of on the same page as my brother when it comes to his take on the Texans. I think that the hype has gotten a little overstated for them coming into this year. I agree with that sense that, they're hunted this year. It's a different story when you're that young, exciting team, and that's how I feel about the Packers too. There's different levels to it, right? So now you're viewed as this contender. I still view the Chiefs as the class of the AFC, and we'll see if any of these other teams in the AFC could potentially unseat them. The Chiefs have an even better roster than they did last year, but yeah, I expect this division to be competitive. Obviously, the Jaguars had a little bit of a rough day. The Titans, we'll get to them. That it's like they tried to lose that game. Honestly, the same thing with the Jaguars. But the Colts and the Texans, if Anthony Richardson could put it together, watch out. We could be in for a really exciting finish in the AFC South this year.
Let's stay there with the Jaguars before we get to the Browns and the Bengals-Patriots game. Jags blow game. It's like the same old Jags.
Yeah.
Right? They're up in this game. You feel like they have control of it. And then as they start to lose the momentum, Doug Peterson makes a really stupid move to go for on his own side of the field, and bang, there you go. As we have the blinds going up, and now we're blinded. But either way, I thought that was a bad move by Peterson, and Trevor Lawrence, he does some good things, but then it's finish the job.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was tough to watch, honestly. Like, even watching that game, I mean, the Dolphins were a mess for most of that game. I mean, talk about an offense that you expect to be a high-powered offense, and they really just could not get it together. They couldn't establish a running game. Tua was struggling early on. Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill were held in check for most of that game, and the Jaguars have this, what you would view as a commanding lead, but they miss so many opportunities, and then you have some questionable decisions that are being made by the Jaguars at the end of that game. You had a horrible fumble by Travis Etienne that essentially, if he scores right there, it ices the game, but instead he fumbles at the 1-yard line and ends up giving the ball to the Dolphins. They then have that huge play by Tyreek Hill. He scores an 80-yard touchdown, and now you're in a situation, the Jaguars, it's the beginning of the fourth quarter. You've lost your momentum, right? You're up
Completely
lost your momentum. Now you're up 17-14. You could have potentially been up 24-7 had Etienne not fumbled that ball and if he would have went into the end zone and scored. Now you're in a situation where, okay, it's 17-14. It's the beginning of the fourth quarter. Peterson makes the decision to go for it on his own side of the field on 4th and 1. And it ends up being, in hindsight, obviously a very poor decision, but even at the time, it was a head scratcher. You've lost all your momentum and you decide, hey, let's make this basically a complete disaster. They actually got lucky that the Dolphins kicker ended up missing a 42-yard field goal right after that, a complete shank. But at that point, like I said, all momentum's gone, and they end up losing that game.
The Dolphins' defense, which never really gets any credit, they're the stars of that game because they kept them in it. When Jacksonville, they went, what was it, 14-0 at one point?
Yep.
You keep them in check. You didn't let them run away with the game. What's the defensive coordinator? Weaver over there, who got promoted. I'm pretty sure that's his name. They do a good job. So Vic Fangio leaves, new defensive coordinator in, did a pretty good job in week 1. Trevor Lawrence, like you mentioned before, played well. Brian Thomas Jr., I know the hype from training camp. He made the nice play on the touchdown. He didn't have a huge game. Had the touchdown, though. He's going to be pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was an odd day at the office for the that was the thing, was that the Jaguars are up in that game, but it's not like they were really doing anything all that special offensively either. I mean, I think Lawrence played pretty solidly for the most part, especially through the first 3 quarters. But even Christian Kirk was being held in check. Yep. Evan Ingram really wasn't getting any looks, it seemed like. So you had a very uneven performance from them offensively, but they're still up in that game. And you're holding a very explosive offense in Miami in check for essentially 2.5, 3 quarters, and then you end up losing that game. So like you said, it seems to be same old Jags. I still think, and I know that my brother was also pretty high on the Jaguars, I still think that they could potentially make a run in this division. I think that they have the talent. They have a better defense than they did last year. I think that they have some better pieces offensively around Lawrence than they did last year. I think even though Calvin Ridley's a good player, I think that the fit there didn't really make sense. It seemed like they basically had 3 slot receivers last year in Kirk, Zay Jones, and Calvin Ridley running around. There were some separation issues there. They were kind of easy to game plan against. Now you have some more dynamic options. You got Brian Thomas Jr. You could take the top off of defense. He's a big receiver. So I like the Jaguars, but they have to get out of their own way. You don't see a team like the Kansas City Chiefs losing a game like that yesterday. It seems like it's constantly these same kind of teams like the Jaguars that allow these games to get away from them.
And I'm genuinely asking this, does Kirk have a drop problem? Because I saw a bad drop yesterday. I know that was the major issue last season with that team. Yep. They just drop way too many passes, and Trevor Lawrence, if you looked at his expected stats, he's supposed to have a huge year. He didn't because of the drops. Like, come on, fix this issue for Trevor Lawrence, who he's supposed to be this generational player.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I think Lawrence, to this point in his career, obviously he got the big extension in the offseason. He hasn't really lived up to that generational prospect hype that he got. I do think he was dealt a bad hand. Obviously, we know all about the Urban Meyer situation when he in his rookie year, and they haven't always put great pieces around Lawrence. There's been some issues there, but yeah, I mean, even Kirk, like you said, I mean, last year he only had 4 drops in 12 games.
Okay,
I mean,
so no drop problems.
But yesterday he was rough. There was a big drop in that fourth quarter yesterday to convert a third down that kind of would have brought momentum back to the Jaguars had they converted that third down, and instead the opposite happens, and a drop happens, and the rest is history.
It's like the same problems almost reoccurring the next season, and it happens to somebody that didn't have that problem last year. Like, you look at the Vikings, who fumbled nonstop last year. I'd never seen a team fumble more.
Yeah.
Their first drive or second drive of the game, they fumbled yesterday. It's funny how the same issues kind of sometimes lead into that next season.
Absolutely.
Another bad. We're in the bad now. We're in the bad performances. Okay, bad performance. The Browns, and we're going to talk about the Browns in a little bit.
Yeah.
More at length, but they're blown out at home. This team has no identity whatsoever, because you're supposed to have an elite defense, right?
Yeah.
So you're supposed to have that defense that literally wins you games. It won them games last year.
Yeah, number one defense last year.
Even with Deshaun Watson playing terribly, and he did play a little bit better before he got hurt, but still winning them football games on their own. That game against the 49ers, unbelievable.
Yeah.
But you get blown out at home by the Cowboys, who have 2 rookie offensive linemen, basically 1 wide receiver, a tight end, and a bunch of running backs.
Yeah.
They go into your building and blow you out week 1. For a good coach and Kevin Stefanski, that's an embarrassing. Get rid of Deshaun Watson for a second. Defense and coaching. That is a terrible, terrible start to the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to completely pin all of it on Deshaun Watson. I mean, I probably will. I'll put a lot of the blame on him for sure, but I don't want to pin it all on him. I do want to touch on what you just talked about with the defense, but it is really tough when you're on the field constantly and being put. I mean, there was, especially towards the end of the game, there was a lot of situations the Browns are going for it on their own side of the field and things of that nature, and you end up putting your defense in losing situations. Ideally, the Browns want to be a version of the 49ers. They want to control the ball, they want to run the ball, and they want to they have some good playmakers on that team between Amari Cooper, now they have Jerry Jeudy, they have David Njoku. Obviously losing Nick Chubb last year and now starting this year is a huge loss, arguably the best runner in the league when he's healthy. But, you want to establish possession of the football and control the clock and keep that elite defense off the field as much as you can, so that this way, you could let it rip when that defense gets on the field. Let Myles Garrett go after the quarterback. Use that great secondary that they have to cover all the receivers. They should have, like you said, there's an idea for an identity there.
Right.
But in practice, there's no identity, because unfortunately their quarterback play is so miserable that they can't have any sort of identity on offense. Now your defense is out on the field a lot more than you would like. And we saw what happened, case in point, yesterday against the Dallas Cowboys.
It's just an abysmal performance. And even I'm looking at, the Cowboys stats, the way they finished. They didn't kill them. I mean, they didn't kill him offensively. Prescott had an okay day. Wasn't like this crazy, crazy day from Dak. They had the punt return by Turpin, who, by the way, is going to be a weapon with these new rules.
Absolutely.
That is a weapon for Dallas. And maybe I'm wrong on Dallas. I didn't have them making the playoffs. So, am I wrong? I don't know what to think after watching them against a good defense, a great defense, the number 1 defense. I don't know what to think of Dallas right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if any team is losing to that Browns team that we saw. Maybe the Panthers, that would be, or the Giants. All right, maybe those would be the 2 teams that I'd say that are, exactly. Talk about bad QB play. And speaking of bad QB play, I like the Cowboys coming into this year. I thought that they were a wild card team. I think Philly's probably better than them. I liked a lot of the changes that Philly made, especially on the coaching side of things. But we'll see. Dallas, I'm kind of in wait-and-see mode, I think. So now when you move into the bad quarterback play, and Deshaun Watson is one of the first that comes to mind. Obviously, we saw the way he played in that game yesterday. I mean, this guy is just such an enigma. So we don't need to go down memory lane. We all know about the situation that he got in, all the legal troubles, the suspension, all of that. Obviously, the trade to the Browns, the massive contract that they gave him, which we'll get into later. But this guy just forgot how to play football. It's bizarre. I mean, he comes out of Clemson. He's this huge prospect. He plays extremely well for the Texans. And now he goes to the Browns, and, he didn't play football for as long as he did. And not only did he have that huge break because of the suspension, but he played, 6 games last year, right? And everybody wanted,
something like that.
yeah, I believe he was 5-1 as a starter last year, and everybody wanted to hang on to that. Well, oh, look, they were 5-1 with him, but meanwhile, their offense was better last year when Joe Flacco came in. So, and now you see the way that he played yesterday. I mean, not only does it seem like he's not accurate anymore, he also, I mean, there were some plays yesterday where he has no feel for the pocket. He's running out of clean pockets. There was a fourth down play yesterday where he has a clean pocket. Obviously, the game was pretty much out of hand at this point, but he has a clean pocket. He rolls out of a clean pocket, ends up running into pressure, and then is pump faking a couple times, trying to see if somebody will get open. He has the ball in his hands for almost 6 seconds before he ends up getting sacked on a fourth down play. I mean, just the downfall of him, and trust me, I'm not angry about it. You know, it's not that bad seeing him play some poor football, but it's interesting to watch. I mean, it's crazy to see a guy playing some high level MVP caliber quarterback play when he was in Houston to what he is now.
Yeah, I think you nailed it right on the head. He's lost his feel for the game, and my watch is blowing up right now. We're not talking about this game because the outcome will be decided when this comes out. But Christian McCaffrey's not playing tonight.
Wow.
He's inactive
well,
tonight.
We'll have to see how that... Wow, I didn't even know he was on the injury report. That's surprising.
He had the calf issue, and now they're saying
right.
Achilles issue in training camp. They thought he would play. Heat said
I
he
didn't
would play.
even think it was a question.
That's crazy. He's not going to play tonight. Interesting for the New York Jets.
Wow.
But
yeah.
with Watson, yeah, I mean, it's sad because this guy was such an exciting player. He was so good, so much fun to watch. And now it's terrible. He's missing actually, it's not even his fault. The game was over, and he lobs up this ball to Amari Cooper. Cooper didn't look good yesterday.
Yeah.
And Amari drops a wide open touchdown. It's not good over there right now offensively. I don't know what they do, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, forget
Did
it.
they cut Jameis?
No, Jameis is still there, I believe.
He's still there?
Right? Yeah, I mean, forget it if their defense regresses at all from last year and their offense is at this kind of caliber that we saw, and I don't want to overreact too much. We saw a lot of subpar offensive performances from some teams that we expect to be good offensively as we get into the rest of the season. But the problem is that, when we talk about an offense like the Bengals, we've seen it from Joe Burrow. We know Joe Burrow is a great quarterback. There's some other offenses. We talked about the Dolphins before. They were sluggish for basically 3 quarters yesterday. Mm-hmm. The problem is with Deshaun Watson, he's an enigma. Like I said, we haven't seen it from him in years now. So it's a huge concern for sure.
More on the Cowboys later. We're going to talk about Dak getting the big extension and the other contract holdouts, hold-ins, no longer holdout for Jamar. But with this Bengals team, Joe, there's so much noise outside of, inside the room, outside the locker room, and I think that led to a loss yesterday, a really bad loss for a team that's almost becoming their identity starting slow now.
Yeah.
And that's not a good thing because when you play in a conference, in a division like the AFC and the AFC North, that's an issue when you're going to be competing for the top spot with a good Ravens team who impressed against Kansas City even though they lost because they didn't play their best game and they were a toe away from potentially winning the game or losing by 1. But that's not easy in that conference, in that division, to just be dropping games to literally, probably, easily one of the 3 worst teams in football.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was like you said, they're known as a team now that gets off to slow starts, which, like you said, is something that maybe sometimes you could get away with it. The New England Patriots have got away with that a couple of times during the Tom Brady-Belichick era, but I don't know if this team is quite up to snuff with those Patriots teams that, I'm referring to. So, and then when you talk about, the Chiefs getting, that huge win to start the season and, they're the class of the AFC, you're competing with another great team in your division in the Baltimore Ravens, who obviously started off the season with a loss, but we expect big things out of them this year. It's going to be a tight division all the way through. You're competing for that home field advantage throughout the playoffs. And when you get off to poor starts, you're fighting an uphill battle the rest of the way. And I agree, there was a lot of noise going on with the Bengals coming into this season. So you had the T. Higgins holdout for a little while. He ends up actually being out with an injury in the first game, which is obviously a huge loss. He's a great receiver. You have Jamar Chase, which was, I know that you guys have talked about this on previous episodes, just such a bizarre situation.
crazy.
There's still no new contract. He ends up playing, is kind of limited in that game in terms of snaps, but still played a decent amount. But their offense is just a complete mess. He barely practiced with the team. He barely had a camp with the team with his quote-unquote hold-in throughout the offseason and throughout the preseason. And now you see a sluggish offense. So the question is, how long will it take for that offense to get going? I don't want to completely dismiss New England. I think that, going into the season, I did also project them for probably winning 3 or 4 games. And who knows, this could be the first of 3 or 4 wins. But their defense, they're known for being a defensive-minded team. Mayo is known for being a defensive-minded head coach. And they played well. But I think this was probably more about the Bengals being out of sync offensively than the Patriots being in sync defensively.
Just an ugly game. And they didn't do anything really well on offense, particularly well on offense. I want to pull up Zach Moss's stats very quickly.
I believe Moss had about 40 yards, and he had that touchdown. They really couldn't get anything going on the ground or in the passing game. I mean, Burrow even looked like, I was talking about Deshaun Watson doing this, like there were some clean pockets that he had, and he ended up kind of getting some happy feet, seeing pressure that wasn't there, kind of that Sam Darnold, seeing ghosts.
Yep.
It was concerning for sure. I still expect big things out of the Bengals going forward in this season, but it's definitely concerning when you consistently get off to these slow starts, and it's hard to get off to a slower start than losing in a game where you're a touchdown favorite against a team that's not supposed to be very good this season. That's a rebuilding team with their rookie quarterback sitting on the bench.
So we classified these as the good. We started with the good. That was the bad. The Jags, the Browns, the Bengals, that's the bad. And there was actually something worse than what the Bengals did and the Browns did yesterday. There was worse yesterday. And there were actually 3 different examples of worse. So we'll start with the New York Giants.
Oh, boy. Here we go.
Who, you know what, Joe? I thought about this driving here, okay? You know that I have been a Mets fan my whole life, and I know misery, okay? I know what the Jet fan has gone through, right? And this is going to sound like an insult to Jet fans, but it's really not. It's like me sympathizing with you and being with you because, Joe, for the last 12 years, the Giants are literally the Jets.
Yeah.
They are the Jets. They are the Browns. They are an embarrassment of the league because that's what the Jets are. The Jets have been an embarrassment. Yes, okay? Is that an insult? Take it as you will. But so have the Giants. The Giant fan, and I can't stand when the owner says, this is a proud franchise. It means something to be a New York Giant. No, it doesn't. It does not mean anything at the moment to be a New York Giant. No. All it means is embarrassment. The Mets have had bad seasons, Joe. There have been times off the field I've been embarrassed to be a Mets fan. But really, they haven't been as bad on the field where I'm like, oh, I'm embarrassed by the play on the field. I am genuinely embarrassed today to be a New York Giants fan. Embarrassed. I don't want to tell people that I root for this team. That's just a really nice hat, and that's why it's there. It's blocking something at the moment. Then they don't block well, but this hat is good at blocking things at the moment. They're a joke. Daniel Jones, I've tried to have this belief, this sick belief that it was the organization that failed him. And I didn't have much expectation for year 6, but I didn't think it would be this bad. He's unplayable at this point, and he's going to lose Brian Daboll and Joe Shane their job, even though they did everything they could, and they know this. They wanted a quarterback badly, but couldn't get one. They're going to lose their job because of this guy.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things that you hit on there. I won't lay into the franchise itself any more than you already have. I mean, you're obviously a lot more passionate than I am. But Daniel Jones specifically, I mean, you know that, me and you have had some arguments about Daniel Jones over the year. And the funny thing is, whenever I hear that year 6 term being thrown around, I mean, the fact that we're going into year 6 with this guy now, and we're going to get into the contract, I'm sure, a little more, but that he's in this contract, and you're right. It's just, it's a joke. I mean, if you ask me, the worst thing that could have happened to this franchise in recent memory was that fluky season that they had 2 years ago. Daboll came in. He did a great job. I'm a Brian Daboll fan. I think that he's a great offensive mind. I think he had a lot to do with the development of Josh Allen. I'm bringing up Josh Allen again. But anyways, I just love him. But anyways, I think that Daboll's a good coach. And unfortunately, like you said, he probably is going to lose his job. And I even think that Joe Schoen is a pretty good GM. I thought that the Brian Burns trade in the offseason was like a home run. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're dealing with, a somehow even more poverty franchise in the Panthers there, but I thought that they swindled them in that trade. Yeah. Burns is an up-and-coming player. They extend him. That was a great deal for the Giants. He's made some nice draft picks over the last couple of years. Obviously, Andrew Thomas is a franchise left tackle. The pieces are there, but the problem is the quarterback situation. It's not only that they don't have the quarterback situation figured out, it's like, where do we go from here? Mm-hmm. Because you have Daniel Jones. I mean, they could potentially get out of this contract, and I'm sure we'll get more into that after this season. So that's a good thing. But where do you go from there? Are you bad enough that you're saying, hey, we're top of the draft, we're going to, try to go for one of these quarterbacks? It's not really supposed to be a great quarterback draft class. But then again, you could have a guy like a Jaden Daniels from this last year's draft class that's, a late riser and ends up being a top pick that we didn't really expect at this point of last season. But they seem directionless at that position, and locking Jones into that contract was a huge mistake. I know me and you had a lot of arguments in the past about it. Mm-hmm. I hammered it from the get-go. I thought that Jones, not only did the Giants overachieve 2 years ago, but Jones really seemed to overachieve, and even his version of overachieving was 15 touchdown passes and 3,300 passing yards. So now you're in year 6 with this guy. The offensive line is still not great, but if you watch the tape from yesterday, which obviously I know you watched the whole game as a Giants fan, I mean, he has no pocket awareness. He has happy feet. Even when he does have a clean pocket and he's sitting there and he has time, he's inaccurate and he's making poor decisions. I mean, this is a bad quarterback.
He thinks he has no time. Joe, he hasn't had pocket awareness ever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ever. And you know what? Again, I see the signs. I see both sides. And the people that hate on him, they'll tell you he's had no talent. He didn't have talent in college. What makes you think he has talent now? And I'm like, I don't know. You see some flashes, but it's not. It really is. He has no talent. Everybody else has been blamed for his mistakes. Well, he's got a good offensive coach now. He has a number 1 wide receiver. You mentioned the offensive line. It's not a great offensive line, but they were pretty league average yesterday. They were around league average according to PFF yesterday on Sunday afternoon. So tell me, what's the problem? He ran into a couple of sacks. He doesn't have it. I'm done. I can't.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like you kind of touched on it. They overinvested in him from the start. They reached for him in the draft. That was a surprise draft pick when they took him 6th overall, right? And nobody expected it. Nobody thought that he had the talent that was worthy of a 6th overall pick. He doesn't have that type of NFL arm talent. I won't bring up Josh Allen again, I promise. He doesn't have that Anthony Richardson type arm.
There we go.
Or a Patrick Mahomes type of arm. He has pretty average arm talent for a quarterback. He never really played great competition in college. We don't need to go back there too much. We all knew it was a reach at the time. And you would think that the Giants would kind of cut their losses at some point and say, okay, well, this guy hasn't really shown much, but a lot of people thought like you did, where they thought, hey, we haven't really put this guy in the best position to succeed. He hasn't had great offensive lines. Maybe it's the coaching. Maybe it's the offensive coordinator. Maybe it's the weapons. Then you have this year that he has 2 years ago. Brian Daboll's a great offensive mind. He overachieves, but still doesn't wow by any means. No. But now you think, okay, what if we get him that number 1 receiver? Well, guess what? Now he has Malik Neighbors. Granted, it's a small sample size. It's 1 game, but we have a huge sample size of 5 years before this. I mean, if you combine this 1 game, so basically since the start of the 2023 season, this last year, the games that Jones played in, and now this year, you're talking about a guy that's thrown 2 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just awful. I mean, that's not a starting NFL head coach, and I don't know where a starting NFL quarterback, and I don't know where the Giants go from here at the position.
I'm scared. I think everybody's going to lose their job, and you're right. I like Daboll. He had a terrible day calling plays, but I don't know what to do. And I'm happy it's not my job. And I don't know who wants that job. I don't know what GM says, yeah, give me that job.
I don't think Belichick's going to want that head coaching
Why would Belichick
job.
Want
I don't know why he
job?
would want it.
There's no reason, because the strength of the team yesterday, the defensive line, did nothing. Absolutely nothing, which was another embarrassment. Let's talk about another embarrassment, though. How about being up 17-0 to a team's rookie quarterback that couldn't do anything yesterday? How about the Tennessee Titans? JM's probably pissed off. His 3-star loses.
Yeah.
I had the Titans money line, and
bad beat. Really bad beat.
We can't win that game?
Yeah.
Oh,
no, it was awful.
God.
I mean, Will Levis, I mean, what are you doing? I mean, you want to talk about, again, the common theme of the show seems to be the bad quarterback play. I mean, Will Levis was awful yesterday. That interception, that pick six that he threw yesterday, was one of the worst interceptions I've ever seen an NFL quarterback throw. I mean, and he knew it. I don't know if you saw that image of him right after he threw it, but he literally got down on his knees and put his hands on his head and looks up, and the play's still going on, and he's like, what did I just do? I mean, that's a rookie-level mistake. And listen, granted, it's his first start of his second year, and he didn't play a full season last year. And I think Will Levis has talent, but this was the big question mark with him, was the decision-making and the accuracy. Again, another raw-type prospect like an Anthony Richardson that we talked about. And, I mean, the fact that Caleb Williams also looked awful yesterday. He had less than 100 passing yards. He got away with a couple mistakes. I know Keenan Allen dropped that touchdown, but he also missed some pretty easy throws. He was trying to do some things yesterday that he would do back when he was at USC. He's trying to scramble out of the pocket, run back 20 yards. Can't do that in the NFL. And he's going to learn that. I still think Caleb Williams is going to be a great quarterback. I really do. I think that he's tremendously talented. But we're talking about the here and now. And yesterday, he was awful. The Bears didn't score a touchdown on offense yesterday, and they put up 24 points. Their defense and their special teams won them that game. They were down 17-0, and the Titans just imploded. They imploded completely. It was embarrassing to watch. Will Levis was embarrassing. That whole Titans team was embarrassing. How you blow that game is just, it's disgusting.
Right, it's not like, the Bears defense played well down the stretch last year. I know all the numbers that tell you they were one of the best in the league down the stretch last year. But are you that good?
Yeah.
Just the special teams, the defense, obviously they got in the field goal range a couple of times, but that's because the defense made plays. It's a terrible loss for a Titans team who, listen, I didn't think they were that bad. I think their roster is like pretty good. And I like the coach. I like the coaching changes they made. I know Vrabel's a great coach, but I like Callahan. I think he's going to be a good coach.
Yeah.
He brings his dad to fix the offensive line. They make the 7th overall pick. They drafted Latham from Alabama. They have a nice tackle there now. I like the moves they've made. Talented team a little bit. Not a last place roster for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
But they played like a last place team yesterday. That's an embarrassing loss.
Absolutely.
And then, do we even want to bring up the Panthers?
Oh, boy. I mean, I don't know what there is to say about them. I mean, Bryce Young, I think, got dealt a really poor hand last year. Their offensive line was horrible. They had no run game. The coaching was a mess. The weapons weren't getting any separation. I mean, he was resorting to basically just shoving the ball down Adam Thielen, a 33-year-old Adam Thielen's throat last year, because he was the only guy that had any sort of consistency whatsoever in terms of getting any kind of separation or just being a reliable weapon for Bryce Young. Now you go into this year, they make the trade for Deontay Johnson, they draft Xavier Legette, they bring in David Canales, who I'm a fan of. I think that Canales has done some great work. I know that my brother has also talked about him on this show, and it was just a horrible showing yesterday. I mean, again, Bryce Young got dealt a really poor hand last year, but he looked bad on Sunday. He looked really bad. I mean, he looked skittish in the pocket. Maybe the height really is going to be an issue for him that he can't get over, because he looks like he's totally uncomfortable in the pocket. Like, he doesn't even want to be there. And then even when he gets out of the pocket, he ends up running into pressure, or he puts himself in a position where he just makes an inaccurate throw down the field. He was, 14 of 30 yesterday? That's inexcusable. I know this Saints defense is, a veteran, solid defense. They had like Tyrann Mathieu making some good plays yesterday. I'm not trying to completely discount the Saints. Derek Carr played extremely well yesterday, which was
shocking,
interesting. But the Panthers defense also was also embarrassing yesterday. I saw a clip of they had 3 defensive linemen tripping over each other when they were trying to contain an outside run from Alvin Kamara later in that game. But just an embarrassing performance from Bryce Young. I'm rooting for him. I really hope.
I do too.
Because I think that this is probably going to end up being a pretty good quarterback class. And, I don't know if he's ever going to, Stroud will likely end up being the best quarterback out of that class. We'll see what happens with Richardson. Obviously, Levis has also not been great. We were just talking about him. He was awful yesterday. But it would really, that trade, especially if Caleb Williams ends up being great, that they made with the Bears is going to be, it already looks bad. It could end up being the most lopsided trade in NFL history if Young turns out to be a bust.
Yeah, maybe sports history. That's how bad that trade ends up being. I'm rooting for Bryce Young. I hope he does well. I liked him out of college, but it doesn't look good right now. I know Canales, he's done really good work with quarterbacks that kind of looked like their careers were tailing off. Not saying that for Young, but it might be getting late pretty early for Bryce Young. But they're just bad. They're a bad football team.
They're a bad team.
And I had hope for them. I thought they would be better. I thought they could possibly get over their win total 4.5, 5.5. I think it moved up to 5.5. I had hope that they could do that, win some games. The Saints are bad. I mean, they're not going to be a good football team.
I agree. I don't think they're going to be very good.
That's not going to be a good team. And Dennis Allen's going to get fired. And I understand that. I'm sure Allen had those guys, extra prepared because you can't lose at home to a team that was as bad as Carolina was. So I'm sure there was extra motivation in that building. But
I mean, the Panthers made them look like Super Bowl contenders.
Yeah,
they looked like the greatest show on turf yesterday, the New Orleans Saints, with Derek Carr at the helm and a poor offensive line.
That's not a good team. And that's a really concern. To lose, you could lose the game. And I had the Panthers, by the way, plus 3.5.
Yeah, I did too. I did too.
You could lose a football game to a division rival where you're underdogs on the road, but lose by 37 points.
It's just abysmal.
That's abysmal.
No, they hopefully Bryce Young gets his act together. Hopefully this was a blip on the radar. It's a new system with David Canales. Hopefully it's just a common trend that we saw this first week. But in terms of the bad quarterback play, but like I said, I mean, we haven't really seen it from him yet. And he was dealt a bad hand yesterday. I know I keep using that analogy, but he was. And this year it should be better, but we got to see it.
Joe, time for week 1 overreactions. This is something we're going to do all season long. We're going to react and we're going to overreact. And week 1 overreactions are more of a thing because we haven't seen football in a very long time. This isn't what these teams are going to be. But I think we have some really, really good overreactions here that are going to make some people say, what did you just say? Joe, I'll let you start first, though. What's one of your overreactions?
My first overreaction is that Michael Penix Jr. will start games for the Atlanta Falcons this season. Not in the future. I know that they want him to start games in the future, but this season. Listen, I was worried about what I saw from Kirk Cousins yesterday. You're talking about a quarterback that was extremely immobile. He's obviously coming off of the Achilles tear. Was always cause for concern going into the season. They faced a really good Pittsburgh Steelers pass rush yesterday. I mean, TJ Watt had a hell of a game yesterday. Not only was the box score obviously very good for TJ Watt, but he even had some great plays that were wiped out by penalties, some that weren't his fault, some that were his fault. And he just didn't look good, Kirk Cousins. I mean, he was statuesque in the pocket. It seemed like he couldn't really get into his throws. I saw some breakdowns this morning on Twitter talking about how he had torn his Achilles in his right leg. So that's the leg that he's using to push off of and get power into his throws. And you could see that he was hesitant to do it yesterday. He couldn't get the kind of power that he wants to into his throws. You're talking about a quarterback that's aging, and now you throw in that he's recovering from this major injury, and it didn't look good yesterday. The Falcons' offense looked sluggish. Granted, it's obviously a completely new offense with a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback, and all these shiny toys around him in the form of Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts and Drake London, and the results just weren't good yesterday. So if this ends up being a problem for the rest of the season where Cousins just doesn't respond well to his recovery to the Achilles tear at his age, we could potentially see a Michael Penix Jr. get into some games at some point.
Very interesting, Kirk Cousins. And kind of worry about tonight a little bit with Rodgers not playing for such a long time, but then coming off this injury. Like, that's a big injury, and maybe you're going to see some regression. They're a team that I had high hopes for in the regular season. I didn't think they'd make any noise in the postseason, but because of the easy schedule, I thought they'd really make some noise, but that is a really disappointing week 1 loss. Yes, to a good defense, but still a very disappointing loss early in the season.
They got beat by 6 field goals.
Yeah.
They didn't even score a touchdown, the Steelers. I mean, Justin Fields played okay yesterday, but it was really concerning. I'm worried about the Falcons moving forward for sure.
All right, my first overreaction Baker Mayfield might legitimately be a top half of the league quarterback. And that might not sound like an overreaction, but I thought that Baker Mayfield last season was a product of the system with Canales and just all these great weapons. And not to say they don't have these great weapons. Evans is still amazing, but Godwin aging, Rashad, they have the running back, sure, and middle of the pack offensive line, but really the subtraction of the offensive coordinator who has fixed so many quarterbacks, I really thought Baker would go back to the old Baker Mayfield. Yes, it's the worst defense in the league, one of them. But hey, it's an overreaction, right? Baker Mayfield might be a top 13, 14 quarterback in this league going forward when I thought we'd see major regression. So just an unbelievable game from him throwing 4 touchdowns, almost a perfect passer rating yesterday. So good for Baker. He might be legit in this league.
Yeah, I don't hate that take. I mean, honestly, I would think it would be more of an overreaction to say, hey, he's going to be an MVP candidate or something like that for this year, which
I'm
would
not
probably
there
be,
yet.
Yeah, which I think is certainly fair. That would be a little bit of a crazy overreaction, but honestly, he had a great year last year. I was definitely concerned coming into this year about what you just touched on with losing David Canales, considering what he's done for quarterbacks, and you have a completely new system this year. You did touch on the fact that he did play a bad defense yesterday. The Commanders' secondary
might be worse than the Giants.
It's rough. It's not very good. I don't want to be too mean here, but it's bad.
Bad.
So yeah, I mean, I think that we've seen some good things from Baker Mayfield with the Buccaneers. I mean, he was great last year. Obviously, they were a playoff team. They won a playoff game. I don't hate that. I mean, I kind of viewed him coming into this season as maybe a little bit of a tier below, like that third tier of quarterbacks. You have like your Jared Goffs and your Tuas, like more of like I know that we throw around this word or this term very loosely, the game manager types, right? Like not like game breaker type quarterbacks, but good quarterbacks. That's what like a Tua or a Jared Goff is. I thought maybe he was a step below that just because we've seen more from those guys recently than we have from Baker. It was really just the one really good season. Baker was awful a couple years before that, obviously going from Cleveland to being awful with Carolina. He had that short stint with the Rams, basically as like a backup, came in relief in that one primetime game. But yeah, I don't hate that take. I think that Baker Mayfield, maybe we're seeing a true career resurgence here.
It's crazy. All right.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I don't know how much of a hot take this is. This was something that I was thinking about coming into the season, and I think I kind of a little confirmation bias, saw it come to fruition in week 1. I think that the Cardinals, the 2024 Arizona Cardinals, are going to be the new 2022 Detroit Lions. And what I mean by that is, if you remember, before the Lions had this great season in 2023 where they made the NFC title game and nearly won that game, and obviously they were world beaters last year, 2022, they were that sneaky, really tough team that you didn't want to play. They were phenomenal offensively and bad defensively. And we talked about the Cardinals defense before. That defense is not very good on paper. It shouldn't be a good defense. They got lit up by the Bills in week 1, but they were up in that game because of their offense. And I don't even think we saw the full version of what the 2024 Arizona Cardinals offense could be. Marvin Harrison Jr. had 1 catch for 4 yards. And I think a lot of that was game plan. I think that, the Bills had were playing a lot of cover 2. They were running the ball down their throat a lot, and it was effective. But I think that the Cardinals have the ability to do that. They have a really solid running back in James Conner. They have a solid offensive line. They have a good quarterback in Kyler Murray, a guy that I've defended a lot throughout his career and I think is in for a big season this year. I really like Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, how could you not? He's one of the best receiver prospects of the last decade.
Yep.
And then you have some other weapons there too. Trey McBride is a really nice tight end that they have here. For a lot of fantasy football people really like Trey McBride. And Michael Wilson too. I think Michael Wilson is a very solid talent to have there as a number 2 receiver, obviously a second-year receiver that you have there. I think that the Cardinals are in for a little bit of a surprising season in the sense that they're going to be a lot more competitive than people think. They're going to be really exciting offensively, but the defense is going to be their downfall. That's where that comparison comes from for me. The 2022 Lions, the 2024 Arizona Cardinals, I view them as very similar.
Yeah, I love it. The Cardinals were a team that I was higher on than I think most people this year. The defense is bad, but offensively they're going to be good. This is a team that, they could be sneaky heading into next year and sneaky this year too. You mentioned it. They have the pieces, and they were competitive last year as a bad team.
Yeah.
Bottom bottom tier of the league, obviously, where they have the 4th pick, but they were competitive, surprisingly, and I think a lot of credit goes to a guy I didn't believe in, and I was so down on Jonathan Gannon. I thought there was a chance he was one and done.
Everybody was down on him coming into the season. There were those cringe speeches everybody saw.
And they played tough for him. They played
absolutely.
really tough for him last year, and this season he's already that's a tough environment to go first game play Josh Allen and the Bills, and you go and you almost win that game. So impressive there. My next one, it's an interesting one. I have now fully believed the Trey Wingo brain rot, whatever you want to call it, from the beginning of the year, that there's noise in that building. I think the Bengals are going to miss the playoffs. Week 1 overreaction. I think the Bengals are going to miss the playoffs as a team that I had going far in the AFC playoffs, and I'm switching right away. Wow. I think there's serious problems in that building. I think the Jamar Chase stuff and the T. Higgins stuff is not a good sign. The offensive line's better than it's been in years, but I don't know. I think there's some serious turbulence within that locker room, and I know I kind of stole one of yours here, but I don't know how Zach Taylor is going to handle this. I had questions coming into this season about Zach Taylor losing his offensive coordinator and how he would be. I'm not saying he's going to get fired, but I just think starting off slow is never a good thing, like we mentioned before. And you play in a conference with so many good teams that if you're 10-7 and there's a tiebreaker, somebody else has it, you lost to the Patriots week 1. That could be the end of it.
Well, I mean, that really is the definition of an overreaction in week 1, especially because you were so high on them coming into the season, and now you're kind of buying into, like you said, I believe that was what I said to you last week when you sent me that Trey Wingo tweet, the Trey Wingo brain rot.
You didn't like it.
I didn't like it because I just viewed it as, like it's easy to say something like that, considering the fact that there was a lot of smoke there with the T. Higgins holdout, and then obviously he came back, and then the Jamar Chase hold in. Burrow obviously got paid. I mean, I think that one thing that people aren't talking about is that this really is a make or break season in a lot of ways for the Bengals because, like you said, Zach Taylor, there's some questions that are rising there. I mean, he comes from that Shanahan-McVay coaching tree, and really, I mean, the results aren't speaking to the levels of other guys that have come from that tree recently, right? I mean, there's a lot of talent there. Their offensive line seems to be much improved. They seem to improve upon it every year ever since Burrow's rookie year. And it should be the best offensive line that he's had now coming into the season. You saw the struggles. I view it as more of slow start, blip on the radar. These guys didn't practice a lot together in the preseason or in camp because of the Higgins holdout. And then you also had the Chase hold in. He wasn't really practicing with the team. We didn't even know if he was going to play on Sunday. Everything seemed a little out of sync. I mean, there's definitely smoke there. I see where you're coming from. I'm not quite there yet. I still have high expectations for them. In my mind, I still think it would be disappointing if they ended up missing out on the postseason.
How about this? They're 5.5-point underdogs in Kansas City this weekend, and they play Kansas City tough.
Yeah,
that's a team that plays Kansas City tough.
I don't hate that. I mean, I see why that's the case.
At this point, they're like, obviously it's not going to go that way, but right now they're projected to be 0-2.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be 0-2 heading into next week. We know the stats of teams starting off 0-2 making the playoffs.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's a concern, but listen, they've recovered from the slow starts before. This team's been there, done that in terms of the slow starts, and they still end up making the postseason. They made the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. They've been to multiple AFC title games. I still think that they can pull it together. I am definitely concerned about the things that you talked about, some of the smoke around, like, bad vibes with the whole Chase and Higgins situation, especially with Chase. I mean, how does that make T. Higgins feel that he's literally franchise tagged and Jamar Chase is due for a contract for another 2 seasons, and yet he's now the one that doesn't want to play because he wants a new contract, and he's talking about how he wants to beat Justin Jefferson's number. I definitely see where you're coming from. I think this is going to be a topic that we follow closely throughout the season, but I'm not there yet in terms of your overreaction.
And your final overreaction.
My final overreaction. So one overreaction I did have, which, like you said, you kind of stole from me, was that Zach, it's okay, I forgive you, that Zach Taylor might be on the hot seat. My other overreaction is that Deshaun Watson, not only is this the worst contract in the NFL currently, it's also the worst contract in pro sports at the moment, and it is the worst contract in NFL league history. That's my overreaction. I just never seen anything of this magnitude. I ripped into Deshaun Watson before. The fact that this guy is playing at the level that he's playing at, which is a very low level of play. The fact that there was a news story that broke today that there's potentially another claim now made against him. He might be in some more legal trouble. He got a fully guaranteed contract from the Cleveland Browns before he even played a snap. Everybody thought that was ludicrous at the time. It seems even more ludicrous now because people thought, hey, at least, it's Deshaun Watson. He's still a great player. I know that there are some other bad contracts, even in the league today. Daniel Jones is one of them, for sure. But to me, Daniel Jones, it pales in comparison to the Deshaun Watson contract at this point. There was the Russell Wilson contract a couple of years ago that ended up being horrendous for the Broncos. I think Deshaun Watson's is the worst in NFL history.
It's not a bad take, the fully guarantee. The owners were pissed when they gave that out, and they were not wrong. They were definitely not wrong. My final overreaction, I was very impressed with the Rams last night. On Sunday Night Football, excuse me. Yeah. I was very impressed with the Rams and thought that was almost a good game for them. They're down in that game. They dealt with so much injury up front on the offensive line. Obviously, they lose Puka Nacua. He's going on the IR. But I was impressed with the Rams more so even if they won the game. I was just the overtime was not good. I mean, to get run on like that was not good. Take overtime out of it. But I was impressed, and it made me feel very good about my pick of them winning that division. Matt Stafford looked really good. He got banged up a little bit, too, when the offensive line went down. Still, we know how tough he is. I feel great about this Rams team, and I was impressed in the loss in Detroit last night.
So you're still expecting them to be a contender and win that division?
I still think they win the division.
Wow. I mean, we'll certainly have to see how things play out for the 49ers, not only in the Monday Night Football game, but moving forward throughout the season. Yep. There's a lot of smoke there, too. Christian McCaffrey's not playing. By the time that this episode is out, we'll know the results of that game, and JM will have that covered. But, I mean, the Niners are still an extremely talented team. Their window's kind of coming to a close, but I like the Rams. I mean, losing Puka Nacua for the next couple of weeks is certainly going to sting. If Cooper Kupp plays to the level that he did last night, I mean, maybe they won't really miss him all that much. And McVay is such a phenomenal play caller, such a great offensive mind. You have a great running back there in Kyron Williams. Matt Stafford is really having just the level of play that this guy's been playing at as a Ram has been extremely impressive. Obviously, we all know that, he's won a Super Bowl there. He had a great season last year. He had a great game last night, I thought. Yeah, I mean, I don't hate that. I could certainly see them being a contender for that division, if not winning that division.
Very nice, Joe. Overreactions. We'll have overreactions every week, not just week one. Can't wait for those. Those will be a lot of fun. Let's move on to some of the primetime games before we get out of here. The Friday night game in Brazil. Joe, I'll let you take the floor. Just one thing. The NFL hasn't gotten something more wrong in a very long time. The field conditions, the player safety. I mean, you sent the B-Team NBC crew there. It literally felt and sounded and looked like a minor league. If there was anything like a minor league football game, that's what it looked like.
Game.
Right. Yeah. With two premier franchises, two great fan bases, and by the way, two teams projected to do big things in the NFC. That's a huge game in the States, whether it's in Green Bay or in Philadelphia, and you completely take that away. Send the Steelers and the Falcons there, please. Send the Giants and the Vikings there, please. But don't send those two teams there with as important as that game was for the NFC. And then to lose Love because of the field conditions, that stinks.
Yeah.
I don't want to blame the field conditions, but you know what I mean.
No, absolutely. I mean, well, first of all, don't worry, because the Germans have the pleasure of getting not only the Giants, but the Panthers also later in the season. I don't know what the Germans did to deserve that.
You're welcome, guys.
But hey, you're welcome, Germany. But yeah, I mean, from the get-go in that game, you saw Saquon Barkley on his first carry fell in the backfield. And when I saw that, and they were talking about guys didn't have on the right cleats, and it was a soccer field, and the soccer players wear different cleats, and it's not meant to play football on, and this, and the other thing, it was a disaster. Like you said, they had the B-Team broadcasting team there. It was, the vibe of the stadium was very strange. You heard that Brazilian PA announcer going off constantly. There'd be a 3-yard carry. Oh my God, 3-yard carry! But it was bizarre. And I certainly was not. I wasn't happy about the fact that the Packers were playing there to open up the season going into it. Like, I want to see football in the United States. I'm sorry. And especially, we had all these storylines that were coming out prior about how Twitter X is going to be banned there, and there's a $9,000 fine if you tweet from there, and you can't wear green, and the players can't really leave their hotel room. And then we end up finding out the Packers hotel is 2 hours away from the field, and it was just a disaster. I don't understand how the NFL is this multi-billion-dollar company, and they end up saying, okay, yeah, play on this crappy field. I don't know if you have the right cleats. I guess we'll just find out. You got guys slipping and sliding. Jordan Love and Saquon Barkley and these mega stars are slipping and sliding all over the field. There was a bunch of missed throws by Hurts and by Love. Love ended up cramping later in the game. It was just a disaster. And to touch on Jordan Love, it was an uneven performance by him. It's the first game of the year. We saw a lot of really uneven performance. I mean, it really ended up being one of the better quarterback performances of the weekend, which isn't really saying much because we saw some abysmal ones that we've gone over extensively at this point. But Hurts also didn't really play that great of a game, but, wasn't that bad compared to a lot of the other performances too. The field certainly seemed to mess up both of the offenses, and it really does suck that Love got hurt at the end of this game. Matt LaFleur made some comments saying that we'll see if he's cleared for this coming Sunday, which was a shocker to hear. I mean, those couple of hours, or really that 12-hour span from the end of the game until when we finally got the news of what the actual injury was some of the most stressful 12 hours of my life, just refreshing Twitter constantly, thinking the guy could have, I'm watching videos of these Twitter doctors talking about the
Twitter doctors.
The Twitter doc. I got caught up in the Twitter doctors because I'm worried, is my team's season over after one game in friggin' Brazil? So luckily, thank God, it ended up being just an MCL sprain. It seems like the most he's going to miss is maybe 3 or 4 weeks. They actually are kind of on the optimistic side of that timeline. It could be sooner, so we'll see. But it was disappointing. I thought that it was a bust, the first NFL game in Brazil. I don't know if they want to do it again because I certainly don't want the Packers going back there, I'll tell you that.
If they do that again, they really just not learning from their mistakes. I completely agree with everything you said. It's almost tough to judge. I mean, Hurts started off that game so poorly.
Yeah.
And it's like, again, you want to blame the field. You want to blame the fact that you're in Brazil. Honest to God, I will give everybody the excuse, but I'm very happy that Love is going to just miss a couple of weeks. I actually almost texted you because I know that exact feeling of not knowing the injury. Plus, they can't tweet now, which must have been
God, it was
awful.
Horrible. Yeah.
But he's okay and only should miss a few weeks. That's big for the Packers. And, I mean, listen, you have Willis. I don't know what the schedule looks like, but, you hope maybe you get a win or two, kind of survive, and then hopefully Love comes back and goes on a run like he did at the end of last season.
They have the Colts and the Titans coming up the next 2 weeks, and then the Vikings after that. I mean, the Colts are a tough team. We'll see. I mean,
you never know.
They have to just stay alive for the next couple of weeks. Hopefully they don't, if Love ends up missing, let's say 3 weeks, hopefully they're not 0-4 or anything like that. I think that this Packers team is talented enough that they could squeeze out a win or two even without Love if it does end up being about 3 weeks. But we'll just have to see.
All right, Joel, you mentioned before, the Colts and the Packers next week. Let's look ahead before we get out of here. We'll each pick a game, and the game we're looking forward to the most coming up next week. Joe, you start us off.
So the game that I'm looking forward to the most has got to be the Buccaneers going to Detroit and playing against the Lions. So the Lions are playing a playoff rematch in back-to-back weeks, playing obviously the Rams this past Sunday, and now they're going to be playing the Buccaneers this coming Sunday. And I'm very intrigued to see a couple of storylines in this game. First of all, Lions got off to kind of a rough start offensively against the Rams, ended up pulling it together, ran the football effectively, ended up pulling out that win in overtime. I'm curious to see how well their offense will perform against this Buccaneers defense, this Todd Bowles-led defense. And then for the Buccaneers, we touched on Baker Mayfield before. Mm-hmm. I'm curious to see how he performs. This Lions secondary is much improved from last season. Should be a much better secondary than Baker faced this past Sunday against the Commanders, which is arguably, as we said before, the worst secondary in all of football. So I'm very curious to see how Baker Mayfield performs, how this Buccaneers offense performs, if the Buccaneers defense could hold the Lions. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how this game plays out.
Yeah, very nice. I agree. I want to see what Baker does against a very formidable opponent. And for Detroit, I mean, they didn't look great. Goff did not look great yesterday. They really carried by the run game. So I'm interested to see how Detroit plays as well, more so even than Baker. My game I'm looking forward to the most, Sunday Night Football. The Texans, again, the bright lights are on the Houston Texans this season after such a great year with C.J. Stroud. I think they'll be able to handle the pressure, but they're playing the Bears. And the Bears go on the road. Caleb Williams, first road game in the NFL after a really tough start against a very formidable opponent. So let's see what he's able to do on the road this week. Bright lights for this team and really for this Bears defense, which looked really good against a bad opponent early in the season here, week 1. Obviously, later in the year in 2023, they stepped up. I want to see what this Bears defense looks like against a very formidable Texas offense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good pick. I'm looking forward to seeing if Caleb Williams plays any better than he did because he didn't play very well. The Bears kind of got carried by their defense and their special teams. Really quickly, I would just like to say that the Bills and the Dolphins should be a really good game.
Yep.
That's going to be an important early season matchup. Curious to see if the Dolphins offense looks any better, how Josh Allen performs. And I'm only throwing this in there because I said it's a guy we're going to keep an eye on. I'm very curious to see if Kirk Cousins looks any better against the Eagles next week.
And that's a tough game. The Eagles home opener, Monday Night Football.
Yeah,
I don't like the Falcons.
Neither do I. They got
a
a tough schedule to open up the season. The Falcons. They really needed that game against the Steelers.
The first 3 games are tough.
Yeah, absolutely. So it could be really downhill from here. We maybe could see Michael Penix get into some games if they really struggle.
This Falcons bold prediction 13 wins is not off to
Not
a great start.
great.
I knew they were losing this coming week though, so I already had the Eagle game as a loss.
Right,
already.
you had that factored in.
But I did have them beating the Steelers. We'll see what happens.
We'll see.
Joe, thank you so much for stepping in. This was a lot of fun. I'm sure we'll be doing this more often. Hope you enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, and see you guys next time.
See you next time.